Hello, welcome to this special edition of Talking Europe. Now, as the United Kingdom formally leaves the European Union after 47 years of membership, we are today in Brussels, where I'm in the company of Jean-Claude Juncker, the former head of the European Commission from 2014 until December 2019, and before that, Prime Minister of Luxembourg. You almost certainly know him best as the man who's been overseeing the UK's Brexit withdrawal process from the EU, a process he recently said had been a waste of time and a waste of energy. Mr. Juncker, thanks very much for being with us on France 24.
It's my pleasure.
I'd like to start with that quotation about the waste of time of Brexit. It's been a very long process. In fact, it started all the way back before the referendum when David Cameron tried to renegotiate the UK's membership of the EU. Looking back, considering all the time that's been spent on Brexit, do you wish that you'd made more concessions to David Cameron at that point to avoid this referendum result?
We've concluded with David Cameron a deal. This deal, and we were negotiating this deal during days and night with David and others, was never mentioned during the referendum campaign in Britain. And we have made a lot of concessions in that deal, and later on with Theresa May and with Boris Johnson.
They weren't big concessions there, like Margaret Thatcher's rebate.
Well, this concession goes back to the year 1984, so we had not to revisit the rebate. But other concessions were made, mainly as far as the freedom of movement is concerned. Nobody mentioned this during the electoral campaign. Why not? Did they fear to show that Europeans were not in a punishing mood, were not inspired by primitive revanche? No, we have concluded a fair deal with Britain, as I was advocating a fair deal with Britain during the campaign leading to the European elections back in 2014.
Well, Britain has been very Eurosceptic for a very long time. It's not wanted to go along with the rest of the EU on many issues. Before 2016, had exemptions like Margaret Thatcher's rebate on the budget, Britain's exemption on the possibility of joining the euro, all sorts of things. Is part of you perhaps glad to see the back of this troublesome member state?
Britain has always achieved to negotiate concessions. I remember perfectly when I was chairing the intergovernmental conference leading to the single currency back in 91, I proposed the opting out for Britain. So I was never in a mood not to agree to British proposals if they were justified. And some other member states had to be convinced, and some other member states had to be convinced when it comes to the concessions we made in our negotiations with Britain. But our main concern, apart the one to offer a fair deal to Britain, was to maintain the cohesion of the other 27.
So you feel that you did accommodate the United Kingdom as far as you could have?
Yeah, but you know, in Britain sometimes people are forgetting that the European Union is not leaving the United Kingdom, but Britain is leaving the European Union. That make a difference in approach.
Well, looking at the loss to the European Union, losing a member state, but also more than 60 million British citizens, 15% of the EU's economy or thereabouts, and the financial hub of Europe, the City of London. How big of a blow is this to the European Union? At the first place,
it will harm Britain profoundly, and the European Union, but not at the same extent. So, of course, we have to ask ourselves what we did wrong, but Britain has to ask itself why it was the majority of British people in favor of leaving the European Union. This is a sad day for the European Union. It's a tragedy in front of history. It's ahistoric what is happening in Britain for the time being. But Britain is a great nation, a big country. British people have inspired so many positive undertakings in the world that I will never have irrespectful feelings when it comes to Britain. I like the British.
When it comes to the actual referendum campaign, however, you have expressed negative feelings. You said recently that lies were told in the referendum campaign, and it has been proven, of course, that there were claims made that were palpably untrue. Would you go so far, though, as to say that the actual result of the referendum itself was illegitimate, as many people in the UK themselves believe?
No, if you are asking people to express their view on a major issue, and if they are doing so, you cannot put into question the validity and the legitimacy of such a decision. We have to respect the decision taken by...
But do you wish that you'd perhaps stepped in during the campaign when you heard things that you believed were untrue?
I think that I was wrong when I decided, on the advice of the British colleagues, not to intervene in the debate, because I could have told, as others could have, the real issues, because there were lies in the campaign, as everybody knows today. I don't think that this would have changed the course of the process, but I would have a better feeling today if I had intervened.
Now, of course, there are a long-time Brexiteers, as they're now known, such as Nigel Farage, who spent a long time within the European Union. He has spent the last few days celebrating and predicting that the UK leaving could be just the beginning of other exits. Do you acknowledge that there's a risk there, or do you feel that actually Brexit has brought Europe closer together?
First, the acceptance of the European Union increased dramatically after the referendum. Point number two, I don't think that others are intending to do the same, because they have noted during this long process, this too long process, waste of time and energy, the cohesion of the 27 was maintained against any kind of expectation. Nigel Farage didn't believe that the cohesion of the 27 would be maintained. He doesn't believe it now. It will be maintained. It will be difficult because there are diverging interests of, amongst the 27 when it comes to the notably bilateral relations with Britain. But I said the morning after the referendum that this referendum, although I didn't like the outcome, will not put into danger the existence of the European Union. It will not.
Well, the next phase of negotiations is likely to be very tricky. As you said, this transition period that the UK is now entering, just 11 months long. Michel Barnier, who will negotiate for the EU, and Ursula von der Leyen, your successor, have both said it's basically impossible to negotiate a full trade deal in that time. What do you think can be achieved in that time?
I don't know what can be achieved, but I know that this period of time is too short. The British government can decide before June to ask for prolongation. That's a decision to be taken by number 10 and by the British government. It's not up to the European Union to propose it.
Now, on the same day, the European Parliament voted in favour of the Brexit agreement. The Scottish Parliament voted in favour of holding a new independence referendum. As we know, Scots voted 62% in favour of remaining in 2016. Would you like to see Scotland rejoin the EU as an independent nation?
You know, when I was president of the Commission until December, I never interfered in domestic issues in Britain. Now, as a former president of the Commission, I will not do that. It's a Scottish and a British question, and it's a domestic issue for Britain, not for us.
What about the UK coming back? The Parliament President David Sassoli said that he didn't want to say goodbye, but rather arrivederci, which is more see you again. Would you support a campaign for the UK to come back?
This has to be an inner British campaign, and not a campaign dictated by the other Europeans. I wouldn't exclude that one day Britain will change its mind, as it did recently when it voted against the membership. But this is music of the future.
There are quite a lot of British citizens who perhaps don't believe that their country will rejoin the EU, but they're hoping to keep some of their European rights. Guy Verhofstadt, among others, has talked about a sort of EU associate citizenship, whereby individuals could pay a kind of membership annually to the EU to retain those rights. Could you support that idea?
We have to protect the interests of the European citizens living in Britain, and we have to protect the well-understood interests of the British people living in the European Union. It's too early to say which kind of forms this protection of the rights of citizens can have.
Well, one last question. Looking back on your time in office, if you can choose one of each, what would you say was your proudest achievement and what would you say was your biggest regret?
Brexit was not easy, but as we were not responsible for the outcome of the British referendum, we are not guilty for that. My regret is a different one, that we were not able to conclude the negotiations on the reunification of Cyprus. My biggest satisfaction was that the so-called Juncker plan, this investment plan for the European economy, because the investments were down when I started my mandate, was a success. That was well done.
All right, Jean-Claude Juncker, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for speaking to us on France 24.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks to you as well. See you soon on France 24. Plenty more Brexit coverage coming up all across the next few days.